complicity. I thought a lot about how I wanted to start this video and wrote and rewrote probably a dozen intros, but every single time they came back to that one word. It seems impossible to be alive right now and not think about it. The news throws it in our face every single day, but there's so much more to it than just the House or the Senate or the judiciary or the executive branch or the government. It's every aspect of life. If you care about anything, how can you not feel its constant pressure? In October of 2016, I stood on a street corner in a largely minority neighborhood holding a clipboard and trying to register people to vote. Several people told me that before they saw the sticker on my chest, they assumed that I was canvassing for the man who would ultimately be elected. Because they knew, just as I did, that no matter who ultimately won, I was going to be basically fine. That the only real way I endanger myself in this world is by fighting against the power structures that I benefit from. And what are the chances that I'm really going to do that? Hello, by the way, and welcome to the Week I Review. You can call me not great. And today I am talking about Kitty Green's narrative debut, The Assistant. The only thing I knew about this film going into it is that it was the Harvey Weinstein movie. Not in name necessarily, but in action, telling the story of someone who worked for him during his days of predation. And knowing only that, I went in expecting something a little more graphic than I ultimately got. Not like the Nightingale in an office, but I expected the titular assistant, Jane, to be the object of the chairman's affection, and that we as the audience were going to have to witness all that entailed. But it's not. Indeed, it is possibly the least controversial way that the film could deal with what shouldn't be a controversial topic in the first place. Now, I want to clarify that because it sounds dismissive of Green and Co.'s achievement. What I mean is that what The Assistant is portraying and how it does so is so matter of fact and honest that to find fault with it and to try to drum up any kind of controversy about it would be so brazenly telling on the part of the person who wanted to push back against it. There is nothing to object to in this film except for the fact that it had to be made at all. And it did have to be made, and I'm sure getting it made was hard as hell. Funding a movie like this must have been a nightmare, and the number of company names you see at the film's opening speaks to that fact. It is such a damning indictment of the film industry, sure, but also our society, that it makes you feel as powerless as it does its protagonist. The film takes place over the course of a single workday. Now, that is a very long day because being a new part of that industry, as in many others, means working obscene hours for not a lot of money. Jane is the first one in the office and typically the last one to leave. I wouldn't be surprised if it was a 12-hour day minimum. But you do it because it's a stepping stone. Working as Harvey Weinstein's assistant during the heyday of Miramax or the Weinstein Company absolutely would be a way to get ahead. And because of that, hundreds, if not thousands, would kill for the opportunity. At one point, Jane is asked what she wants to do, what this is all for. She says she wants to be a producer. You're smart, she's told. You have what it takes. We always need more women producers. So why do you want to throw it all away? This comes at the film's turning point, as Jane goes to HR because she has pieced together the thing that the audience goes into it already knowing. I imagine if someone had missed the news somehow, that it is possible to watch the first half of The Assistant and not really know what it's about. You'd probably have to be a man, though, because as subtle as it is, I don't know, I don't think it's that subtle. Jane comes into the office, she turns on the lights, she goes into the chairman's office and cleans. On the ground, she finds an earring. Already, I'm uncomfortable, because I know what that means. Then she puts on gloves and sprays down the couch, and I also know what that means. It takes 20 minutes for me to realize that Jane doesn't. That she was told to pick up and clean the couch, and that she did so without thinking much about it. The film tells the story of the day she realizes the truth, and that everyone else around her is well aware, and nothing is going to be done about it. I mentioned earlier that this is Green's narrative debut. Although it's her third feature, it's her first semi-fictional one. Her previous films, Ukraine is Not a Brothel and Casting JonBenet, are documentaries, and she brought the same journalistic tendencies to this film that she brought to those, interviewing more than 100 people as she worked on the script. This film is the culmination of all of that preparation, and undoubtedly that is why so much of it feels real. But it was the right call to not tell the story as a documentary, because that would get caught up in the Weinstein of it all. And the truth is that The Assistant isn't about Weinstein. It's about the people who refused to stand up to him. Ukraine is Not a Brothel focuses on a formerly Ukrainian movement called Femin, who fight against society's treatment of women. They protest topless, with slogans painted on their chests and backs, shouting as the police inevitably grab and drag them away. All of it intended to bring exposure to their ideology and to bring down the power structures. It follows the women who are a part of it. Ina, Sasha, Oksana, and others. These are women who believe so deeply in the rightness of their cause and the importance of their message that they put their safety on the line every few days for it. In Ukraine, they're mostly just roughed up by the police. But during Green's time with them, she accompanied a few to Belarus, a country still under the rule of the dictatorial Alexander Lukashenko. They protested in their typical way in front of a KGB office, which is the kind of thing that could get a person literally killed. And yet they do it. They got abducted, Green included, and the stories of what resulted in the humiliation and fear instilled in them by the police are harrowing. The dedication that these women have is undeniable and unassailable. But the film has a twist in the revelation that Femin's founder was, in fact, a man, Victor, who we see at the very beginning wearing a rabbit mask, but eventually shows his face and the kind of person that he is. And it's not a good one. Victor is the patriarch of an organization trying to bring down the patriarchy, the self-proclaimed father of new feminism. But he is not himself a feminist. Just listen to him talk for 2 minutes and that much becomes obvious. But he sees himself as vital, believing genuinely that a man needed to start the movement and to give women the opportunity. Who cares if on some level he did it because he wanted to have sex with them? He still did a good thing. This brought to mind one of the more chilling lines in The Assistant said to Jane by another woman who works at the company. She's getting more out of it than he is. It's a story this woman tells herself so that she can feel okay. Is it true? Maybe. Kind of. But the movie also gives every reason to believe that it's not. The most heartbreaking moment of the entire thing for me comes relatively early on, when Jane still doesn't quite understand what she's a part of. It's as powerful as it is brief, but it makes you think about everything that led up to it. You know the earring I mentioned earlier? Well, it belongs to a woman who IMDb tells me is called Tess, but who isn't actually named in the film. She gets called back to the place where she has done what she believed she needed to do in order to make it. Presumably, she believes that this call is that working out for her, that her opportunity is now. But when she gets off the elevator, she is met only by Jane, who hands her her earring, and that's it. After a pause, Tess gets back in the elevator. Nothing is said. Nothing needs to be. It's devastating. And still, as is most of the movie, Green's camera rarely moves, and on the occasions that it does, it is slow and perfectly smooth. The frames themselves often emphasize the powerlessness of the people within them, and Jane in particular. Oftentimes we see her from overhead being looked down at/on. Things are shown through door frames or windows. Rooms that clearly aren't very big feel enormous because Jane is so small within them. We know that she wants to do the right thing, that she goes to HR in hopes of helping the attractive young woman who was flown in from Boise, Idaho, given a job she has no qualifications for, and put up in a nice hotel for the chairman to meet her at. But what can Jane really do? Her concerns, clearly valid, are still based on conjecture. She has no proof of anything unless someone corroborates it, and no one will. The HR head reframes the complaint she'd like to file into something that makes her sound like a jealous brat, which will go absolutely nowhere. And not just that, if the complaint is filed, that's the end of her time there, and in the industry she wants to spend her life in. She will be blacklisted because the chairman has all the power in the world and she has nothing. She can say something that will do nothing but ruin her own life, or shut up and maybe get to be the producer she dreams of being. How can you blame her for being silent? How can you believe that you'd do any different if you were her? And sure, you can see the turmoil in her face and body language, and presumably it's going to keep eating at her, but also you get numb to horror. Eventually, people start making jokes about never touching the couch, or maybe just being grateful that they're not the ones being victimized. And the new person will be horrified by it all again until they fall in line too. It hurts to see this so bleakly rendered. The only hope that we have isn't in the movie. It comes from our knowledge that after decades of abuse, survivors would eventually speak up, and that Harvey Weinstein is currently on trial for his crimes. But many others, including those with the kind of clout that could maybe have made a difference, would acknowledge that they should have said something, but didn't. This past week saw some particularly horrific testimony of the things the man said and did. If convicted, he'll go to prison for the rest of his life. But the fact that that's even a question, that he could possibly make it to the other side of this with a reputational hit, but the justified belief that he and people like him are invincible, speaks volumes about how corrupt and broken our system is. When Green's name came up after the film cut to black, the man immediately behind me booed. My jaw dropped. I have literally never heard that happen in my life. I turned around because I had to know what this person looked like, but I couldn't really tell. In the darkness of the theater, he had already pulled up his sweatshirt's hood so no one could see his face. I wanted to say something. I don't even know what, just something to make him feel like he can't just do shit like that without someone calling him out for being actual garbage. But I didn't. And neither did anyone else. 8.8 out of 10. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you particularly to my patrons, my mom, Hammer and Marco, Kat Saracata, Benjamin Schiff, Anthony Cole, at Blasian FMA, Magnolia Denton, and Elliot Fowler. If you like this video, that's great. If not, I'm sorry. If you want to see more, please subscribe. I hope to see you next week.